Hey, what's up guys? It's Brandon here for Ours to Nightmare, and today we're going to be doing our MBX6-T build for you guys. First thing we're going to start out on is turning this thing into electric. This comes out of the box about 80% ready to run for Nitro. So you can see that we have disc brakes and a fuel tank on here, and then we got a Nitro engine mount. So we're going to be getting rid of all that. Mugen themselves makes an awesome electric conversion kit right here. Includes everything we need, including a new chassis plate. I'm going to do that video first, and then other videos I'm going to show you guys how we install and set up the Tekin system and our radio. So our setup of choice for this build is the Tekin T8 and RX8 combo. We're running a Savox brushless high voltage servo. So this thing's got 277 ounce-inches and 0.065 ounces of torque. This is the SB2271SG if you want the model number. And then of course we're going to be running our 3100 for our Spectrum DSM2 radio. And that's about it. We might be using a Castle BEC, or we might tap right off the balancer plug for power to the radio since we can run that thing at high voltage. We're going to see which way we go with that. But first things first, we got to get rid of all the Nitro stuff on here and get this electric conversion installed. Let's get started. Okay guys, first things first, we're going to be installing a brand new chassis plate for the electric conversion. The chassis plate that's on here is the Nitro version. Here's our electric chassis plate. So this means that every single thing bolted to the chassis plate has to be removed. So every single screw head that we see on here is going to be coming off. That's the first step. I'm going to do that right away. Okay guys, I've completely removed all the screws on the chassis plate, and here's what you're left with. These are all the front clip, the rear clip. We have the two side chassis guards, and then the center diff unit. So we're going to be modifying this one a little bit yet, but other than that, I've removed everything that makes this thing Nitro. You can see back here we got the fuel tank, motor mount, the hanger for the muffler, and over here we got the old radio tray that was for the Nitro layout. So there's one thing to note when you're doing this whole process. It's pretty straightforward. Again, you're just removing all the screw heads that are on the bottom of the chassis plate. There are two, however, 4 screws altogether that hold in these two bell crank posts. This is for your steering right here and here. They use red Loctite on these. These are steel posts with steel gears going into them. They use quite a bit of Loctite. My Sunblower was pretty ambitious, and there's a lot of red Loctite on my threads. If you counter this, if they aren't coming out easily, don't fight the red Loctite. You're going to strip the head of the screw out and have a really bad day. You're going to have to replace those parts and cut them out. The best thing you can do is apply heat to it. So take a heat gun, hair dryer, whatever you want to have, heat up the spot where the screws go in until you know that it's nice and toasty, to the point where you can't touch it, and then it should release for you pretty easily. It'll fight you a little bit, but at least you're not stripping out screw heads for it. So that's the gist of that. I'm going to show you, here we have the Nitro chassis plate, and this is the electric one. So you can see it's a bit simpler. We don't have the engine mount spot here anymore. We're just going to have a motor mount going into there. And there's just less screw holes overall because they combine a lot of the radio trays and battery trays together. But that's the difference. The new one right here, old one right here. So first thing first, to start on the true electric conversion, we're going to be taking the center diff unit, getting rid of the steel gear that was for the Nitro heat that it's going to endure, and we're going to go to a plastic gear and getting rid of these 2 brake assemblies here. Let's get started on that right away. Okay guys, we got the center diff unit laid out in front of me here, and this is kit big A, and this is going to be our new motor mount, the other bearing holder for the center diff, top cover, and all the hardware needed. So what we need to get the center diff out of here is just remove these 4 top screws, and I'm going to do that right away. Okay, I have these 4 top screws loosened up, and with that, the center diff carrier just falls in half, and now we can pull out the differential that we need to confiscate parts from. So this is the old stuff. We're not going to be using any of that. Not going to be using these discs either. Now we have to get this metal gear off here. We're going to do that by removing these 4 screws. Okay guys, with these 4 screws removed, I can lift this side of the diff off. Now we want to be careful. You can see that's a fluid-filled differential. I want to let all the fluid kind of drain back into there. I'm going to set this on here to hold it upright for me. And what we want to do is recover some of these old parts. So we're going to need the gear, the seal on there. There's going to be an O-ring seal in the shaft and a couple shims. So we can pull this gear off and set it aside. We're going to pop this drive pin out of here, like so. So we got a few shims, maybe just one on this guy. Now I can pull this out drive off like so. The bearing comes off, and there's an O-ring in here we're going to have to recover, and this paper seal here that seals out the whole diff case. Now it might be a good idea to get replacements for these, because removing them it's very easy to destroy them or damage them when you're removing them. So we're going to reuse these for the purpose of the video, but like I said, it wouldn't be a bad idea to grab replacements when you're doing this. Okay, I have the seals removed. You can see them two here, the O-ring and the paper seal. This is the old steel spur gear they're not going to be using. Here's the new nylon one for the electric conversion. We want to pop these seals right into here so the O-ring goes in the middle, like so, and then we're going to line the screw holes on this paper seal as we set it in there. Make sure that it's seated all the way. And we just got to get those screw holes lined up. There we go. So it looks like that. Now we can put our drive back in. Grab your bearing. Out drive goes right on like so. Pop the seal out. I want to make sure that's seated. This metal shim here goes in. The drive pin goes in. Everything's nice and slippery. Like so. And then the diff gear goes right back on. There we go. That's the new assembly. So we can stick it right on top of this. Making sure our paper seal is still lined up, and it is. The 4 screws go back in, and that's all you got to do to convert the diff to the electric one. Okay, now that we have our electrically modified differential assembled, we can set it in our new diff holder. It's going to go in just like so. These parts are included in the electric conversion kit. Stick the gear cover on top. You can line these up with it. And they include 4 3x12 screws to go in here. Now because we're going into metal on 2 of them, I put a Loctite on the threads of these 2 screws going in the metal mount. And the other ones do not require it, they're going into plastic. Tighten these down and your center diff assembly is good to go. Okay, now that we have our differential unit assembled for the electric conversion, we can bolt our front rear clip, our 2 side guards, and that diff unit to our new chassis plate. So really we're just taking all this hardware, putting everything back on. It's pretty self-explanatory. Anything that goes into metal is going to need a little bit of Loctite. So on this side of the differential assembly, we have the motor mount. That's aluminum. I'm going to use Loctite. And like I've stated earlier, the 2 bell crank posts are steel. I'm using different screws for these, and I'm going to use just a little red Loctite on that, not much. These sustain a lot of torque from the steering, so I don't want them coming loose, but you don't have to go crazy with a lot of red Loctite. It only takes a little bit. I'm going to do that right away. Alright guys, I got all my equipment installed back onto the new electric chassis plate. You can see how the layout is here. It's a bit simpler as it looks now. We don't have any of the battery tray or the radio tray installed yet. But the next step is going to be to bolt our motor to our motor mount. So we're going to do that. Okay guys, I got my Tekin motor, my motor mount, and all my hardware laid out here. Now the Tekin motor mount has 3 and 4 millimeter holes for it for the bolts. I'm going to be using the 4 millimeter holes that they provide in the motor mount. All we got to make sure here is that we have everything upright. So I want my solder tabs facing up, and this is the orientation of the motor mount. That's the right side up there. So when we bolt this on here, that's the way we want to do it. Motor is going to be a little bit of an angle. That's okay. I can still get to my soldering tabs. They're not going to be, either all hanging all the way out or too close to the drive shaft. So we'll put this hardware in. We want to use a little bit of Loctite on it. Got it right here. These are both 4 millimeter. And I'll screw this down. Alright guys, I got the mount bolted down to the motor. Now we can put the pinion on. They provide a 14 tooth pinion in the kit. We might be changing this later on, but for the purpose of the video I'll show you the install here. I got the set screw already on the end of my wrench. We want to use a little Loctite on that. Get her started. And now the one crucial thing we want to make sure is that we have the pinion spacing set correctly. So right in the manual they show me that I want from the edge of the motor mount here the pinion to be 12.5 millimeters out. And that is 12.5 millimeters right there. So first I'm going to turn the shaft so I can get to this set screw okay. Double check my measurement. I got it right where I want it. We can torque this down. Okay, I have my pinion torqued down and the spacing is correct. Double check that's 12.5 millimeters from the edge of the motor mount to the edge of the pinion. Now we can set this into the motor mount. Bring the truck in here. We're going to slide this on, and I'll be taking this off later for the purpose of soldering, but just for now we can make sure that the fit's good and then we put our hardware on. So they provide us with these little washers, countersunk washers. And I put a little bit of Loctite on these because again we are going into metal. So to make sure it doesn't come loose. Just going to get this started. And same from the bottom side. Remember, a little bit of Loctite on this. Now this is a slotted motor mount, so we can move it in and out to set our mesh. You just want to make sure that you got just the right amount of spacing, just a little tick back and forth between the gears. It's perfect. That does it for the motor installation. Okay, next step is to assemble the battery tray and speed controller mount. This is pretty straightforward. Speed controller mount slides over the top, 2 3x10s hold it down. Okay, I got those bolted on. Next step is to install this little battery stop. These are 3x8mm screws. Okay, I got that bolted on. Now we can install our Velcro straps through the slots. And with the Velcro straps installed, that does it for the battery tray installation. I'm not going to be bolting this onto the chassis just yet. We have to install the speed controller onto our plate here. I'm not doing that because I have to solder it yet. And it's going to be a lot easier to solder it if it's not already installed on this plate. Now take note that they have a slot right here for the speed controller signal wire to go through. And there's 2 little holders on bottom, so you can run the signal wire underneath this tray safely out of the way, and they'll run over the center of the chassis, over or under the center differential. They have actually 2 places to route it that's safely away from the spinning diff, so take note of that. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, now we can assemble the radio and servo tray here. We got our Savox servo all set to go. Here are the servo mounts I selected, the 4 bolts for those. We have an antenna mount, the screw for that. This is an optional transponder mount. We won't be using that just yet. The receiver box cap, and this is a little, I wouldn't call it waterproof, but a dust-proof grommet that all the signal wires can run in from the speed controller and the servo, and optional transponder that goes right here into the radio box to help keep out, you know, dirt, dust, whatever you may have, but I wouldn't yet call that waterproof. So first step is to install the servo. We're going to run this wire in first. She goes in like so. Then you're going to take your mounts, flip it over, these drop in place, holds her in just right, like so, and I'm going to bolt these 4 screws in. Okay, I have my 4 servo bolts tightened down real nice. Now I'm going to install my receiver so I can get the battery box started. I have my extra antenna length here zip tied off, and remember this is a 2.4 gigahertz radio, so this extra antenna length here is just coax cable. It's not an active part of the antenna. That's why it's okay for me to coil it up like this. If you're running a 27 or 75 megahertz radio, you never want to coil up the wire like this. You always want to run it all the way out. On this particular radio and this kind of antenna, this little end piece here is the only active part. So I want to make sure that that's straight, unobstructed, and in the antenna tube. So we got a little piece of Velcro included with the kit. I'm going to use that to stick the receiver into the box, like so. Then we can take our antenna tube mount. Wire goes up inside there like that. This guy sits in there. It's a little 3x8 countersunk screw, and I'm going to bolt this guy down. We'll get that antenna started. Okay guys, I have my antenna tube installed. I've run my servo wire, cleaned up the extra length, plugged it in my steering channel. I'm not going to be capping this off yet because I still have to solder my speed controller in another video, program that, bind the radio, set the steering, then I can put the cover on. So this is as far as I'm going to get with the radio tray right now. Now we're not using a transponder, so we won't be bolting this on, but if you were, this goes right here. Included 3x10 screws to put it on. Let's move on to the next step. Okay guys, last step for the electric conversion is to bolt in the radio tray onto the chassis. It's going to sit just like this, right in there, and if you see there are 4 bolt holes here that we'll use to secure it. Now if I flip the chassis over for you, you can see the same 4 bolt holes right here. We're reusing the hardware from the old Nitro one, so make sure that you save some of that. They're just 3x10s, countersunk, 4 of them. I'm going to bolt these in now. Okay guys, I put in my 4 3x10 bolts right here. This holds the radio tray in. Really the last step for the electric conversion, we would bolt the battery tray in. And again, I'm not doing this because I have to run my speed controller wires yet after I'm done soldering it. But when you're ready to bolt this on, you can see there's 5 bolt holes right here. And again, these just use 3x10 countersunk head screws. And you remove these when you're taking off the Nitro components, so make sure you hang on to that old hardware. So those 5 bolts will bolt on your last piece. Again, I'll have a separate video for soldering up the Tekin, programming that, but this is how she looks when she's all said and done. Of course, the battery tray would sit right there. So there you have it. That's the MBX6-T converted to electric. If you guys like this video, please comment down below. If you'd like to check out our website, it's rcnightmare.com. And guys, if you have anything you want to sell to free up some cash for cool toys like this, visit buyrcstuff.com. It's like an eBay mecca of RC sales, except it's only for RC, so you're not sifting through pointless posts and things like that. It's super cheap to post up your items. You can buy, sell. There's trader ratings, so go check that out. Thanks for watching this video, guys. We'll see you soon.